Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band podcast. I'm your host, Benediktine, and today we're going to talk about something we don't talk about as often, and that is piano recording and like sparse arrangements and solo piano plus vocals, these types of songs, and piano recording in general, I'd say. And we got a listener question. This was the reason for this episode, and we found it really interesting because Mark sent us a message saying that he loves the podcast. So thank you, Mark, for listening. And he was asking, or he was basically saying he would love to hear more about solo piano or piano and vocal sparse mix type of stuff on future episodes. And both Malcolm and I have done some of that and can definitely share something about it. And we haven't really talked about it on the episode, so I'm stoked to do it this time. And as always, I'm not doing it alone. I'm here with my friend and co-host, Malcolm Owen Flood. Hello, Malcolm. How are you?
Hey everyone, I'm good. Benny, it's great to see you, man. I did my first solo episode on this podcast last week, I'm pretty sure, if that's the way these come out. So that was super weird.
Yep. Was it?
I missed you, man.
Yeah, totally. Me too. Me too. It wasn't doable for me last week, but fortunately you did one. So, but I mean, you're used to doing the YouTube thing, so it should.
Yeah. It was fine, but it's always funner with you, buddy. And I had a good little musical week. I didn't get to catch up with you about because we didn't get to podcast last week. But I got back together with my really good buddy Luke. He was the drummer in my first real band when I was in high school. I joined this hardcore metal band called Messiahs in Fiction. We were like Lamb of God's the closest comparison I have.
I always forget about that, but you told me before. I always forget about that when you said it.
Full on metal, but we got hung out and we just cleared out his garage, set up a jam space, and then tried to relearn those songs, and it was so fun. Because I haven't had to play metal since I was probably, I bet I was 18 when I left that band or something. So it's been a while. It was a workout. So much fun getting that loud and distorted again. Such a good time.
That sounds awesome. But was it a one-time thing? It's
we're gonna keep jamming. I don't know if we're gonna keep jamming the metal stuff or what, but it's just we're both feeling like it's fun to be jamming music right now, just recreationally. We'll be jamming, but I don't think the band's getting back together.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is that we found, because we couldn't remember the songs, all of them, there was a couple that we kind of could fake our way through, the ones that we had recorded onto the little EP we made. I was able to get those back in, through playing it all came back. But there was all these other songs and they just kind of had ceased to exist because we couldn't remember how they went or beyond the first riff usually, and how to play them. And it was that's really sad because we spent so much time on these songs. I remember liking them, but I just don't know what they are anymore. But then we went digging through some old camcorder footage he had and found this show we did, a full set we did at a show we put on at the hall in town. And it was so awesome because we were able to re-trigger, just hearing it, we were able to be oh, I remember the song start to finish pretty much and relearn it. It's it's so important to document, even if it is just a crappy camcorder recording, the songs that your band has, because years from now, if you're not in that band anymore and you haven't recorded them, you will forget, even though it feels like that's impossible because you play it all the time right now. They go away. So I'm so glad we found those, that video recording, because it just brought all the songs back. So now we're trying to relearn them so that we can record them a little bit better than that camcorder audio and kind of have them archived away.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, there's that's the reason why I love the banter, because it's always unexpected and it's fun to listen to, but also there's always some piece of advice actually in there, which is in this case always do these recordings, capture your band somehow, even if it's just a crappy recording. You never know when you need it. And I love that story. Really cool. So, but by the way, people have told us, the people have spoken. I apologized 2 episodes ago or so for our banter, whereas I said it's too long, and I still think it was too long sometimes. So we had a little skip button on YouTube. But since then, I don't know how many people reached out to me. It's 20 plus people or so who sent me DMs and emails and stuff, and then also a thread in the community who were leave the banter alone, definitely keep it in there, and we love it, and the skip button will do for those who don't like it. So people have spoken, banter will stay.
We'll try and keep it on topic as much as possible.
Yeah,
but
yeah. But wait, man, that's so cool. I love that you did that. You did get to do that, and every once in a while, of course, the band probably won't get together again, but like every once in a while, doing that is awesome.
Oh yeah, so fun. It was also really cool because you have your good shows through your life, the ones that you remember, and like I think I was probably 16 in this video, and
Really?
I remember it being the craziest show ever. There was like 300 or 400 people, all ages show, and they're losing their minds, and that's how I remembered it. And it actually was that way.
Yeah, of course it was.
Having it captured, I was like, hey, that really happened. It was chaos. There was ambulances and stuff that had to show up. It was just like a total mess. Such a good time.
Totally. By the way, I'm going to try something now, people. If you are watching this on YouTube, let me see if that works. I can't promise anything, but maybe it works. If you're watching on YouTube, can you guys see this?
That's Band of Rascals, though.
Yeah, that's Band of Rascals. But I still wanted to show you this because I found this earlier when I searched for Malcolm's YouTube channel, and I found the long hair Malcolm picture here, and I just wanted to share it now that he was talking about the metal band. So this is Malcolm with long hair, everybody. If you want to watch this, go to YouTube and watch the episode there. I think it's pretty cool. Yeah.
If you can find photos from that metal show, I had a full-on mohawk, like shaved sides.
Really? Oh God, that's what we needed. That's what we need. Yeah. So what was the band called actually? Is there footage from can you actually find that stuff?
I mean, that footage is not up there. I just did a search earlier because we were trying to find recordings, and there's like the worst show, like the opposite of what I just described, where there's like hundreds of people screaming and losing their minds. There's one there is like there's 0 people and we're sucking.
Yeah.
That's on YouTube. But the band was called Messiahs in Fiction, and the songs aren't up on Spotify or anything. We got to fix that. Get them out there.
Yeah, you have to, man. So yeah, that sounds awesome. Like I had a similar thing actually on the weekend. Because we played a show again, and we don't do that very, very often, but we did now.
Right.
And this time it worked because the last couple of ones got canceled and everything. But now we played one. Next Saturday we have another one, and then in May we have another one, which is kind of spectacular for us that we play that often.
Yep. Plug your band name.
The band is called Farewell Signs. Farewell Signs. It's a hardcore punk band, sort of, and we're releasing a record in early summer, I think in June, on two small labels here in Germany. And there's going to be vinyl, there's going to be a digital version, of course. And it's sort of
awesome.
Yeah, it's such a cool project. Like we have 3 EPs, like 2 are already out. The next one is coming out, and then those EPs get put together to form the album. And there's a concept, like the artworks and the titles of the EPs, and then the title of the actual LP, and all of that is like one piece of art that slowly comes together. Really, really cool. Right. So yeah, I just love to be a part of that. There's a lot of work in the background, and we haven't shared as much of it as we should have probably, but like it's just a passion project, it's just like one piece of art that we want to bring to life. And now it turns into more of an active band again because like it always is, you put some work into it, and it's fun, and then you want to make sure that people actually hear it. So as much as we always said to ourselves, we don't have time for this, and this will never be a real sort of active band and all of that, now we're starting booking shows and all of that. So we'll see.
You're having fun though. That's great.
Totally. So we played a show yesterday that was, on Saturday. That was awesome. Small packed venue, about 100 people or so, but like very small room, sweaty, loud, the way a hardcore show has to be. It's super fun. Yeah, it's perfect. And the next week is going to be probably like double that, I think, but still like packed. So yeah, love that.
Sweet, dude.
Yeah.
Well, hardcore punk and rock, heavy metal, not what we're talking about today, but they are music at least. So
yeah,
you got to give us points for a music-related bander, guys. At least we didn't talk about trail running for 20 minutes.
Yes, exactly. No, we didn't. So back to the actual topic, piano recording. Let's start by saying, or I want to start by saying that that's something a lot of people maybe don't know. I've been playing in punk rock and loud bands and stuff like that all the time, my entire like adult life and like teenage life, but I've always played the piano as well. That was the first instrument that I learned. I started playing with at like 5 or so, and then I had actual lessons until I was, 14, 15 and something. Then I thought like it's like the most boring thing in the world, and I just want to be in punk bands and play the guitar. But then later, or like bass, but then later I got back to playing piano, and I'm so grateful that I learned it, and that because that was the foundation for everything else. I was only able to teach myself the guitar and like all the other instruments and everything I do because I had this basic music knowledge and the ability to play piano. And I'm telling you this because I've always played the piano and I know that instrument very well. I've of course also experimented with recording it a lot, and I've done quite a few projects with other people too. So I know the instrument pretty well, and I have my like go-tos and techniques that I like to use, and that's why I think I can offer advice on this topic. Although most of the music I work on now is like heavier stuff, but I definitely have a background there, and I love to listen to that type of music too. I mean, I have loud music all the time when I'm working, and in my free time I listen to a lot of quiet stuff, if I'm honest. So I don't know about you, man. How much experience do you have with like classical piano or piano project? Can be pop projects too, but like the sparse type of piano and vocals thing, or
Totally. So, ironically, after leaving that metal band, the next band that I focused on was a band called Sound and Science, and it was piano dominant. Like our lead singer played piano, so kind of like an early Coldplay-esque style, where piano was very prominent. So there was a lot of piano in my life at that point. I also took piano lessons and play a little piano. Not as much as you do, but I it's something that I have played. And then the studio that I worked at and got my internship at, that got me started, as longtime listeners of this podcast would be aware, at the Woodshop Recording Studio, there was a piano in that room, and there was a lot of like folk and software recording and country rock recordings going on there that did feature piano as well. So there was a lot of that happening. And then on the flip side, going away from kind of the rootsy piano, honky tonk stuff, I also have experience recording kind of ensembles and orchestras for theater recordings and stuff like that, where there's like a grand piano on the stage, for example. So kind of plenty of experience recording piano, I'd say. I think I've been pretty lucky to get in a room with a nice piano numerous times. They're really fun to record. They're such amazing sounding instruments. And specifically, why we thought this would be interesting was it's really hard to fill up a mix with one or two instruments, or even three, compared to what we normally talk about on this podcast, where we're talking about drums, bass, guitar, and like all of these super loud, consistent, like kind of statically dynamic instruments squeezing through speakers. It's like the total opposite scenario when you are dealing with a piano, which is very transient and not a lot of sustain, and we don't have like distortion or anything to help us. It's a really challenging situation, and if you're used to the opposite being like a dense rock mix, you're going to feel really lost when you get that song that is like a sparse piano arrangement. So I think we could talk about techniques for recording piano, and we could talk about techniques for figuring out how to approach a production that is sparse as well.
Yes. So yeah, that's part of the reason why part of what's so interesting about it is that it's actually that it can be so hard to mix something like that and to record it properly. The other part that I think is interesting and relevant for people is, and that's a question I have for you, Malcolm, is can you record a piano without access to a piano? Like, how good are like virtual pianos, and do you even know, do you even need to know how to record one properly? Do you is it just about how to treat it in the mix, because we all have good samples, or is it worth talking about how to capture one, and like what's your experience there? Has most of the productions you've done, have they been done on like actual pianos, or do you use a lot of virtual instruments too? And what should people do? Because I just assume that the majority of people listening to this who find this topic interesting, they will probably work with digital pianos, I think.
Yeah, and that's fine. I would say that if there's any virtual instrument that sounds real, like the best case scenario for a virtual instrument sounding authentic is a piano virtual instrument. I think that's the technology that's done the best. Like drums have obviously come a really far way recently, but I think pianos are like, there's some really fantastic sounding piano native instruments, packs and other ones I'm sure as well. That said, I would always want to try and get it from a real piano. I think there's still something like different about that to me. In how it sounds, but also in how it's played, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like a piano player is going to be able to give you a better performance on a real piano, like every time, I think. So that's a little bit of thing is just how it tracks, but also there's just it just sounds more real still. Now, it's okay. Like I don't want our listeners to be like, oh, I gotta redo my pianos and scrap this, because not everybody has access to a piano. So that's one reason to use a virtual instrument piano. Not everybody has access to an in-tune piano, because your piano has to be tuned, and that's expensive and hard to maintain. And not everybody has access to a room that sounds good with a piano either. So it's not necessarily about having a piano. It's about having a piano in an environment that suits what you're trying to do and sounds correct. Because much like drums, the room plays a huge role in how the piano actually sounds. So if you put it into a little boxy room, it's going to sound like a piano in a little boxy room. And if you put it in a theater, it's going to sound like a piano in a theater. It's like, it really changes it. I would say, especially so in a piano over something like drums, because you're not really close miking a piano like you do with drums, where your snare mic is very close to a snare, but you don't want to stick a 57 up against the strings on a piano, because it's going to sound like the hammer hitting the string. Like it's not going to really sound like the piano you're trying to hear. So it's I think doubly important that your piano is actually in an environment that's giving you the sound you're looking to capture. So it's kind of like a hard instrument to like pre-produce, where you're like, okay, we want a piano and we want it to sound like this. You have to put in work to making that kind of ideal situation happen. So a good room, a good piano that's in tune, not to mention the equipment. Just thinking that like you also probably want it to be stereo. So if you have a very minimal recording setup, you're going to need at least 2 channels.
Yeah. I took a few notes here because there were a couple of things I want to unpack or talk about. So a few things that I found interesting. So I agree, the room is important, and the instrument itself. Finding a piano that's actually tuned well is really difficult, because a lot of them are not, and people don't even realize. It's kind of hard to do it yourself. It's expensive to hire someone to do it, and then if temperature changes and whatever, like it's really. Most pianos out there are not really in good working condition, I'd say. So you have to find one that's really good. The room is important, I agree. However, I would say that, I mean, maybe I understood it wrong, but I actually like to get pretty close, like to close mic pianos. I mean, you don't stick it right against the strings, but like if you have a grand piano, for example, and you open the top and then you put like 2 condensers in there, one over the lower and one of the higher parts of the strings, and they are pretty close, like not super close, but maybe this high above the strings, and one here, one there. That works pretty well. And also with an upright piano, if you can open it and then put 2 mics in front of the strings, to me, those are pretty close, and maybe I'll add a pair of ambience mics or so, but I get pretty close with pianos.
So I need to clarify that then, because I agree with everything you're saying, but those are condenser microphones, which are going to pick up more of the room than, say, 257s shoved up there, right? So it's just it's that difference. It's the equipment is going to get more of the room. And it is going to be a stereo set, so there's going to be a little bit of a stereo environment spread as well.
And you're going to be further away compared to like a drum shell. It's not this close. You have this distance or something,
Yeah, so it's not that you're miking from far away necessarily, but it is comparatively to like a close snare mic thing. It's a different situation. So
you're right.
Just kind of trying to convey that the room is going to play. The room's going to be in your recording.
Yes.
Kind of no matter what you do.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Also because depending on the dynamics and the song and everything, it could be pretty quiet. And so same thing you often have with acoustic guitars, where all the nuances, like also noise in the room or other things, you have to be careful with that, because it's not a very loud, instrument, and there's a lot of detail, a lot of dynamics. So everything that's happening in the room is going to be part of the recording, and that's also what's cool about it. And that's the next thing I made a note about, and I want to talk about that. And that's the biggest difference for me. Recording a real piano versus a digital one, is that all these little details that you hear when someone plays the piano are part of the piano sound to me, and it's part of what I love about piano recordings. Depends on the genre, but the more like intimate, dynamic, that sort of stuff. I love to hear the noise of the hammer, hitting the string, or like the noise that a finger makes when you actually hit the key. And sometimes, you even hear the chair or whatever, like these tiny, what it sounds like when a person plays piano in a room. That's part of the recording for me. And there are libraries who do a great job at emulating even that. So when you use the pedal, for example, you hear the noise of the pedal, and then you hear the release of the felt against the strings and all of that sort of stuff. And you hear the hammer noise and the fingers. So some libraries do a great thing at emulating that, but it's so much more unique and unpredictable and in a way, I don't know what it is, but I just love that about some piano recordings. And some people really overdo it with that stuff. I knew some recordings where I'm almost distracted by all the noise that they intentionally put in there to make it feel real. Sometimes it's a little much, but anyway, it's part of the recording, and that's part of what separates the real thing from the digital one for me still. And I also have to say that I haven't found a stock or like very free or very cheap piano thing plugin that's really that great. There are amazing sounding ones out there, and you're totally right that it's probably the best sounding digital instrument. But that's one of those things where I think you have to buy something good. You have to try a few things, trial and right. See if it works. But I don't know if there's any like stock instrument that gives you a really awesome piano sound. They will do, and as a background thing in a rock song or whatever, it will probably work. But if it's like a solo piano thing where the piano is in the spotlight, or where it's just piano and vocals, I would get the exact instrument that is the best for the job. I would just invest in the one plugin that does exactly what you want for that production. It's worth it.
That's definitely a good point. I don't think I routinely use any free pianos either, unfortunately. So sorry for the people looking for the perfect free option. I just don't know if it exists. Again, like you
Cubase
said,
just came out with instrument. Oh, sorry. Just the delay. Sorry.
No, that's okay. It sounds like you're going to say that there is a good one.
I just say Cubase came out with one that I like. I don't like it for everything, but Cubase 12 has one that's called Verve. So you can buy that individually too, but it's part of Cubase 12, I think. It's included. And if you buy it as a standalone thing, I think it's $100 or something. This is a really good one. Not the perfect choice for everything. It's not like a bright grand piano. It's more like a stand-up piano, a little darker. I don't know, but it's cool. It's really cool and very detailed, and I like that. So if you have Cubase 12, then you can try that. That's good. But other than that, I think,
it will be. The free one's probably going to be good. It just won't be maybe magical. Another thing that makes me think of is that it's not good is kind of the subjective thing. Like the free one that comes with Pro Tools, I think it's called Ivory. It sounds like a great grand piano. But a grand piano is not by default the right choice.
Yes, that's the thing.
All of the time. Sometimes an upright piano, which sounds totally different to me, is the right call. So that's the other catch, is that it's almost like if you ask somebody to play the song on an acoustic guitar or like an archtop hollow body kind of old jazz guitar, like those sound very different, right? So you have to choose the right piano style for the song as well. So that's another catch. Sometimes you want an e-piano, right?
Yes.
So it's tricky that way as well. You have to kind of figure it out. Going back to the sounds, audience, if you can't tell, we're winging this episode. We're going all over. But there's so many sounds to a mic'd up piano, depending on how you mic it, of course. But like you're going to hear your performer, your pianist, is going to be breathing into the microphone. You're going to hear that. If you're not careful, you're going to hear a click track coming out of their headphones. Really got to watch that if you're doing like a stereo by the head thing. The pedal noise can be huge. And that's another thing that makes choosing the piano, finding a piano that's suitable for recording hard. If the pedals and like stuff can get squeaky and not maintained. So you have to watch out for that stuff as well. There's so much to look at when finding your piano. I think we went into this episode thinking we'll talk about how to record a piano, but I also think we can discuss and let people know when they shouldn't necessarily spend too much time on it and go with a virtual instrument piano. There's kind of both sides to look at. If you can make it work with an e-piano, that might be what you have to do out of circumstance, but it also might just be worth doing if it's not that primary of an instrument.
The right one for the job, basically, is what, like, as always, that you have to do. It can be done digitally. If you can get a good one, a good real one, then do it. If it's the right one, just take it seriously, because in these sparse types of arrangements, it is gonna be. It has to be right, because otherwise it just won't feel right. It's not something you can hide behind anything else. It's in the spotlight. It's the one thing that you pay attention to, plus the vocals maybe. And so it just has to be the right choice, and it's worth taking it seriously and investing in it. So now on to actually making that work. As we said, there are different genres and different aesthetics and nuances, and we can't probably cover them all, but there are, I think, some go-tos and some maybe do's and don'ts that in our experience work well or don't work, and we want to talk about that. So let's say, the question was about mixing, so let's maybe focus on that a little bit. I mean, let's cover real quick. Let's cover our favorite ways to capture it. We already said it in a way, but then we move on to mixing. So to me, capturing a piano is mostly what I said before is I'll pick two decent condenser mics, whatever I have. Ribbons can also be great, but some sort of condenser. Can be small diaphragm, can be large diaphragm. My personal choice are large diaphragm condenser mics, or in some cases ribbons, and I will put them in a position where one captures the lower part of the strings, the other one captures the higher parts of the strings. It has to be far enough away that you don't just capture a tiny snapshot of three strings or something, but you have to capture the whole half of it. But it has to be close enough to give you a stereo image, and to be there has to be a balance between the room and the direct sound. But that's usually what I do. I'll use two mics, capture stereo image of the guitar. The lower ones will be more on the left, the higher part will be more on the right, and it's a balance between getting close but also capturing the whole thing. And you'll find that sweet spot. I think there's not too many. To me, it's not too big of a sweet spot, actually, because if you get too close, what you capture will be too narrow, too focused on those strings. If you get too far away, it won't sound, the stereo image won't be as cool anymore, and you will get more of the room and less of the piano. So you'll find the sweet spot, I think. And sometimes, in addition to that, there might be a pair of room mics. Although I have to say that most of the time I can do with that one pair, and it's just fine. So that's as simple as that is. And sometimes it can be an XY inside the piano. That can also work, or RTF or something. But most of the time, it's going to be a spaced pair.
Yes, I'm usually a spaced pair as well. Very pretty much everything Benny just said applies to me as well. I find that you do get enough of the room in that pair that an additional further away room doesn't usually need to be present. And you'll find that with that further away room, all of those extra sounds, like the pedal noise, like the squeaking of the bench and the breathing, it becomes pretty problematic. It gets it gets louder because it's the proximity to the actual sound source we're trying to capture of the strings is kind of lost. But it sometimes it's the right call. So you'll play with that, but more importantly, you're just going to play with the distance of that primary set and just make sure that's exactly what you want. This is one of those, a couple inches makes a huge difference. So if you back it off just a couple inches, it's going to really change how it sits in your mix. So you really want to spend the time on positioning your microphones above all else. I think that's going to make way more of a difference than choosing what type of polar pattern your mics are in. I mean, that's going to make a big difference too. Or if it's your $1,000 stereo pair or your $4,000 stereo pair of condenser mics, it doesn't matter. It's where you put them that's going to make the biggest difference. As far as where you place them, there is actually one step before that is really deciding the tone of your piano. And that is actually more customizable than you would think at first glance. If it's an upright piano, you can open the top lid, and you can usually take out the plate. I don't know what that's called actually, but there's a piece of wood that you're looking at if you're playing a piano, and you can either slide that open sometimes or take it out and expose the strings entirely. And that changes the attack, the kind of bloom, I might call it, and the volume, and probably 100 other things. But it really is going to change how your piano sounds. So you're going to want to get that combination right. On a grand piano, it's opening the lid to varying degrees. That's going to change how the piano sounds itself, but it's also going to change how the sound projects out of that piano, which is important if you are doing ambient miking or other instruments in the room at the same time.
Yeah.
So worth noting that. But first off, decide how your piano is going to sound with those physical alterations, and then placing the mics. On an upright, there is, a stereo pair kind of at the strings is pretty common for me, but actually I really like to go the opposite side of the piano, on the back side of the piano, which you might picture as shoved up against a wall. So you'd have to pull it away from a wall if that's how you have your pianos. And that's called the soundboard. And you can do a stereo pair on the back of the piano there, and it sounds huge. And it really tames the attack because you're not like directly against the hammer now. So that's a favorite of mine. And ribbon mics are the other way of kind of getting that same sound on the front side of the piano, because they just are much softer on the transients. And with a grand piano, it's kind of the same thing, just inside the lid.
Yeah.
Or under it. Yeah.
Totally. And if you're not gonna open the lid, it's a whole new challenge, because now you can't access the strings and you can't do the whole like what I just described. You got to do it outside of the piano somehow, and it's gonna be less of a stereo image, and it's like just a different way to capture the piano. Part of why ribbons are great on the front side of an upright piano for that sound is because if you put it above the hammers, like the hammers are down there somewhere, and then if you don't mic the hammers, but you mic the strings a little distant from the hammers. But with the grand piano, it's the same thing. The hammers are pretty close to the actual keys, but you put the mics above the strings that are like a couple of feet away from the keys. With ribbons, the cool thing is that because of their figure of 8 pattern, the null actually points at the hammers down there, depending on how you set it up. And so you can, because they capture what's in front of them and what's behind of them. So if you put them against the strings, what's below them, the hammers, are going to be, reduced. So you get less attack and you get a little bit of a more mellow sort of sound. So that's great. On other productions, I love the hammers. So that's the, that's the thing.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to ask you. Do you ever, because some people do that, do you ever mic more of the actual like keys and hammers than the strings, or do you put an additional mic there to capture that sort of stuff? Because I know it's been a trend for a couple of years, I believe. Or maybe it's a German thing, I don't know, but there's a couple of like really, really amazing German pianists who have records out where they did the typical stereo mic on the strings thing, but then they also put mics everywhere that makes a noise on the piano, like the pedals and the keys and the hammers and all of that. And you hear a lot of that on those productions, and it sounds very intimate and close and all of that. But as I said, sometimes it's a little too much for me, and it causes other problems too. But I wonder, do you ever do that, or do you really just focus on what the wood and the strings sound like, and not so much what the sounds are around the player, basically?
Thinking about the experience I've had with pianos, it's usually trying to get, this amazing sound of piano, but really there's going to be a vocal. So all of that, like clunks and stuff, I kind of want to minimize, because it's still going to be there. It's still going to play. Like all those noises will be there. They just won't be as, they won't be captured maybe as pristinely or loudly, which is great. I don't want the vocal getting taken away from. So not really for me, but if you were doing like an instrumental piano recording, you could totally experiment with that. But the warning I will give is that you should consider a piano to be just as complicated with phase as a drum kit.
Yes.
So if I throw those mics on the opposite side of the piano, like on the back side on the soundboard, and you've also got like a front mic, all of a sudden you've got 2 mics capturing the same sound from different directions. So think of that as like a snare mic. It's the same problem's been introduced. And you throw some room mics in, it gets a little more complicated. It all gets, every mic is potentially a worse phase relationship, which means that instead of adding, you could be subtracting potentially if you're not careful.
Ironically, although I said that this is like the cool thing about recording real pianos, ironically, a digital piano can solve that for you if you want that aesthetic, because on some of those, or like almost all of the really good ones, there is a control for like the noise stuff that you can just turn up without bringing up the rest of the piano. Because in the real world, if you put a mic on the hammers or the keys or wherever, you're not gonna just capture those sounds. You capture the piano too, of course, the strings. And now if you bring that stuff up, you got that phasey there's always a compromise. Whereas with the digital one, if you turn up the noise or the hammers or whatever, you only turn that up and the rest is unaffected. So that's actually an advantage now of the sample pianos if they've done it well.
Totally.
Yeah.
Hey, have I ever told you my Elton John story about him
You told
recording
one.
piano?
I don't know if I
Let's
know
tell
that
it
one.
again. It was,
Yeah.
I think an engineer at the Warehouse Recording Studio, which is like a world famous studio that I got to make a record with my Band of Rascals at. And I think the engineer there, Zach, was the one that told me this, because I think he helped engineer on it. But they essentially had this grand piano from, I think, Yamaha or Steinberg or, whoever. I think he plays Yamaha. So I think it was like the Yamaha sent the nicest piano they have for Elton to record at. And it's this grand piano that you can play. It's got strings and stuff like that, but it also records MIDI data if you want. So he was able to sit down, play it once, and it records his performance through MIDI data, and then he can leave and they can replay his performance over and over again and experiment with the miking after he's gone, right? So the piano just keeps playing Elton John. They captured Elton John in a piano and they can just mess with it until they get the recording they want on the record. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's totally crazy. That I try to remember the name of that thing.
It's kind of like a player piano. Because like player pianos were the old version of that, where you could stick like essentially sheet music into it and it would read it and play it. But this is kind of like a computer brain doing the same thing, I think. But very useful, especially when you're Elton John and he's probably got to go play a stadium in a couple hours. He just sits down, knocks it out.
That's so cool. Like, totally. Especially for like someone like that, for sure. No, I haven't heard that story though. I thought but you told an Elton John story not too long ago, or you were at an Elton John show, I think. Or
it was probably, I went and saw him recently, so that was probably it.
You can do, that's essentially or basically exactly what you do with a virtual piano. You play the part once, and then you maybe edit the MIDI, and then you can do it over and over again and figure out, how you want it to sound.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's exactly like that.
So yeah.
I just had the advantage of capturing the room at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I think we both agree that all those details, there's probably more than enough of that in the recording anyways, and if you can decide to experiment with it, but just be aware of the side effects, and the more mics you put against something, the more problems you're going to get too. So you got to really be careful with that.
One more thing, sorry, I want to riff on that just a little bit further, because with drums, it's a necessity to add more mics. Often, because you just you need that proximity to a kick drum to get it to sound like a kick drum. You need that proximity for the punch of the snare, and the toms they're not going to do the tom thing if you're just relying on the overheads. So it's a necessity because of these different sounds. With a piano, that is not necessarily the case. So don't think this is really, again, me trying to steer you away from using more than 2 mics on a piano, I think, because it's like it should be all you need. It should be enough to make it sound like a great piano. So if it's not, it's probably, again, a positioning problem or mic choice problem or mic setting problem. Make sure your low cut's turned off if you want a big low end and stuff like that, rather than a microphone amount problem. So because it's not like the pedals on the piano are the hammers on the piano, are their own instrument. They're just part of the same instrument. So you really should be able to get it to work with 2 mics. So yeah, it's about refining those, not about additive mics.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because you capture the whole thing and you don't have to try and capture things that otherwise are completely lost, like with a drum kit. Yeah. Absolutely.
Drums are just like a bunch of different instruments being recorded at the same time.
That's the thing.
Drum kit is not one instrument.
Exactly. That's honestly how I think about it. Like you have to make it sound like it's one in a way. Like you don't want the drums in space thing, but at the same time, it's almost like recording an ensemble or like a small, whatever. Like,
it
totally.
Absolutely is.
Totally. Okay. So now let's assume we found the way to capture it, or we use a digital one and we found our sound. Now, what about the actual, what do we do in the mix to make it work? Or what other challenges compared to making it like as a background thing that's just there?
Right.
My experience is, and I don't want to, I'll let you start, but I just want to say that my experience is that with a piano is one of the things where to me, definitely less is more. It's rarely the case. I tweak a lot with all kinds of instruments, but I feel for me that I do very little to piano recordings.
I'm totally with you. That's why it's so important to choose the right piano in the right space, because it's kind of like there's not much you can do after the fact. Reverb sounds terrible.
Yeah, I would have said
think
that.
on
Yeah, yeah.
it's so fake sounding on pianos. I don't
Yes,
know what it is, but it
yes.
doesn't sound good. So like,
It almost always sounds like a delay. Does it to you too?
yeah, it's because it's so transient, I think, and like you just the decays sound all artificial. It's
Yeah,
nasty.
yeah.
Um,
Agreed.
so the environment, like having that kind of stereo reverb room built into your recording through the capture that you've done, is your reverb. If possible, I think that's the ideal situation. Is that you don't need to add more. That's really what you're going to want. So good luck on that. And yeah, it's kind of like all things fall apart. Like I don't really like EQing them much because the hammers start sounding really weird if you try and brighten it up a bunch. If you compress it, the attack of the hammers gets really weird. And I think that is because the attack sounds different on each string.
Yep.
So how the hammer sounds on low strings sounds different than high strings. So setting your attack and like transient shaping on a piano is kind of impossible because it's different depending on what's being played. It's not like a consistent drum, for example. Um, I don't know if I can accurately describe why all of this processing doesn't work well with the piano, but it doesn't.
It doesn't. Yeah, I totally agree. I have some theories though. So I don't know what it is with the reverb. Honestly, it just sounds terrible most of the time to me. Sometimes I have luck with like a room sort of impulse response thing, but even that, like if anything, then it's gonna be a very small, short, sort of ambience. I don't know. Even room mics sometimes have that in a weird way. Even if I record real room mics, even they sound weird sometimes on the piano. So that's why I'm not a big fan of them. So, but when it comes to the other things that you could do with it, I agree that compression sounds very unnatural very quickly. Just the ratio between the attack and the sustain, and just it seems like we know very well what a piano should sound like, and as soon as that changes, it feels weird. And especially as someone who's played the piano for a while, but I think most people can notice that. It's just that very quickly it doesn't sound like a piano anymore. And I want dynamics in a solo piano more than anywhere else, basically. I don't want to reduce that if it's played well. So sometimes a little bit because of the sound of the compressor or because of a certain vibe and aesthetic that I want, can sound great to put it through a great compressor with just a little bit, just like kissing the needle, making it a little more dense. But not because I really want to do like 10 dB of gain reduction on a piano or something most of the time. At least. Maybe sometimes transparent limiting can work if it's just, if you really want to control just the peaks in some sections but leave the rest alone, that can work too. And even if you do a lot at times, it can work. But you got to be, whatever you do, pay close attention to whether or not it still sounds like a piano and what you do to the attack and release behavior. Because if that changes, that's what's weird to me. If it's getting too hard, or if the attack is like, if you kill the attack too much, or if it starts to pump, if it starts to feel too dense, it almost gets annoying and hard to listen to. So just pay attention to these things, I'd say, when you compress it.
Yeah, this is another situation that, gives a point to MIDI virtual pianos, because if I'm using a compressor to try and like level out the dynamics of a piano performance I've recorded, it's going to be problematic because we just don't have, it's just starts sounding weird if you have to push the compressor very much. Where with a MIDI performance, even if the performance that was played on a MIDI keyboard was all over the place dynamically, I can limit the dynamics in the MIDI data, and then it's as if it was played more consistently, right? So
Yes.
that's you have to capture the performance right as well. So not only do you need a great piano and a great room and a decent miking, like a great mic positioning, you also have to have a player that can like really nail it, because there's no editing in piano as far as I'm concerned. Like really, cut editing really doesn't work in piano to me. There's too much sustain for it to work well, I think. Slip editing, is what I meant to say. You really need a great piano player. It's so important.
Yes, it is. It is. So, and I totally agree with like controlling the dynamics in the MIDI versus the compressing. That's the way to go. It's just if you have a real piano. But yeah, you're totally right. Editing is tricky, especially if it's not a background thing, but a solo thing.
Have you had any luck with elastic audio editing on a piano?
Yes, I did. There were also times where it didn't work. So, but yes, in
Right.
general, yes, it works. I have to say, I also had luck with like slip editing. Sometimes that works, sometimes the other thing works. In general, I have to be way more careful compared to other sources like drums, and that's I think because of the lack of transients. Because you can hide a cut shortly behind or in front of a transient really easily, and our ears just don't hear it because the transient masks whatever comes shortly after it or in front of it. It's a fascinating
Yep.
phenomenon where you can even if you don't make a crossfade, if it's like close enough to the actual transient, we just can't hear the click, and like tiny artifacts
Yeah.
like that. And with a piano, you can't really do that. And then also, as I said, if the transition, the ratio between the attack and sustain is one thing, but the transition between the sustain and then the hammer hitting again and like the next attack, we just, for some reason we just notice if that is not real, if you change that too much, if the attack comes too early, we just feel like this is not what it sounds like when the hammer stops the string basically. And so it's difficult. So I have more luck with the time stretching and compressing, but there are situations where slip editing can work, so hard to answer honestly.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those nightmares where you have to use every trick in the book
Yeah.
to fix up a bad piano. Acoustic piano and a finger-picked acoustic guitar are probably my two least favorite things to edit, and for the same reason, I think. Because what happens is the note that you're trying to fix has another note that was played right before it that's still ringing under it. They're arpeggiating all of the time, right? And so you cut one thing, but you can hear it in the other note that's being played. And it's just really annoying. That's why I was thinking, slip editing or elastic audio time stretching editing is probably better if the algorithm can handle the different pitches, like the polyphonic material, without too many artifacts. But again, you just really want them to play it awesomely.
You absolutely do. Yes. What about EQ? Because that's another thing. It's funny that even that, I have to be very careful with it. Piano, I'd say, is one of those instruments where I really love tilt EQs because I can make it overall brighter or darker, but I keep the internal balance intact. Because for me, again, the ratio and the balance between fundamental notes and overtones, piano has a lot of like overtones. It's a very it's not just sine waves. If you hit one note, you're actually hitting a couple of strings at once. So you hear a chord actually, and then you hear the overtones, and you hear the other strings resonate with that, and you hear the wood. So there's so much going on, even if you hit a piano key, and that means if you boost or cut in certain places, you reduce part of that note, but other parts stay as loud as they were before, and you can mess up this internal balance a lot. And then some keys, the result is that some keys sound natural and others sound like more harmonically rich or less harmonically rich, and it gets weird really quickly. Or if you boost just a bunch of top end in a certain way, it can sound really hard really quickly. And so I prefer to just do either like very musical shelves and balance those out against each other, or just really a tilt where it's just, okay, this is going to be brighter or darker, but I don't want to mess it up. So no.
It's very challenging. Okay, here's one advanced technique for people to ponder.
Tell us.
So we said capture it sounding like exactly like you want. So like, take off the lid of the piano or whatever if you want it to be brighter, close it down if you want it to be dark. But if you make that decision and then you want to EQ it to be the opposite, you're really in trouble. So if you make it dark, for example, and then you decide you want more like top harmonics in those warm, low notes that are being played on the piano, and you boost it all up, your hammer sounds are going to sound terrible because they're still quite sharp compared to the notes because we've tamed that with the lid. Now, this is good. This is where it gets advanced. If you did the opposite and you opened it wide up so that your string noise, the actual notes, are as rich harmonically as they can be, that's going to be the most top end in those in that capture. Now they are kind of in a more similar like EQ curve position to the attack. So now you can darken the whole thing, and it's going to darken the rich sounding strings and the hammers at the same time. So you can the less contrasting you make your piano, the more you can alter it in the mix. Does that make sense? It's confusing myself even talking about it, but if you get the darkness wrong by setting up your piano, you're done. But if you make it all bright and then darken it, you might have luck with that.
Yeah, if it's all bright, you can make it all dark in a musical way and not change it too much. But if it's
because it is the contrast that makes the EQ not work. Otherwise, so if there's any video people that listen to this that have video experience or photography experience, it's like shooting in like an S-log setting or something like that, where the dynamic range is taken out of the picture, or a raw photo kind of thing. You're getting a flat thing that you can mess with. But that said, I still recommend that you try and make it sound right on the capture.
Yes, 100% every single time. What do we actually do then? We do whatever is necessary to bring out the cool stuff, reduce stuff that we think is annoying, while always listening to whether or not it still sounds like a piano. We never want to miss that sort of, and actually, it's a matter of a little darker, a little brighter, capture it good and and choose the right instrument. Try to get the dynamics right by just playing well or changing the MIDI. Use compression only if you really want the sound of the tool you use, I think. Not so much to really compress it a lot. And then also there is, I don't know, it's one of those, of course it has to be, it's always dangerous to give recommendations like that, but it's one of those instruments where if it's played well, that's why it's dangerous to say that, that where the tiny imperfections are part of it and just are cool, and you just have to leave it alone at some part. And I know that a lot of people are going to use this as an excuse for sloppy performances and all kinds of, that's not what I mean. You have to be a really good piano player or have to program it really well. But yeah, the tiny imperfections with pianos is what it's all about, and you have to leave it the way it is. And if there's the occasional thing that's jumping out a little or is a little too quiet, and that's part of it. And then at the same time, if we're talking about a vocal and piano arrangement, then we got to define what's the sort of the star, basically. Is it the piano performance and there is a vocal, but actually the piano is what's important? Or is it the vocal and then the piano maybe has to, support that, and that's a whole different conversation. So how do you marry it together with a really good vocal performance? What would you do differently compared to a solo piano maybe?
Okay, a couple things to clarify here. And sorry if you just heard my stomach rumble. A couple things to clarify here. We generally preach getting really tight performances, but we are generally talking about arrangements that have a lot of instruments. And the more instruments you have in a song or a production or a mix, the more timing discrepancies and intonation discrepancies compound and become a mess. But the less instruments you have, the less that does matter. So you actually can have a pretty loose piano performance as long as it's got feel and groove. It might not technically be accurate to a metronome, but if it sounds good on its own and feels good, then it is good. And a vocal on top of that, a piano and a vocal that are kind of playing with each other timing wise is going to sound totally great. It's going to sound like when somebody sits down at the piano in your living room and sings a song. That relationship can work. It doesn't have to be so on. It's when you have another 3 instruments that are all trying to do the same thing and they're all a little bit off that starts getting crummy. So there's knowing your genre and your arrangement density is going to let you kind of develop a feel for what's acceptable timing wise. And essentially, I would just mute the metronome and listen to it, and you shouldn't be thinking about the timing. If you are thinking about the timing, it's probably something's wrong with the timing, right? So there's that. But now back to the mixing and dealing with that stuff. 2 things. You're going to have tools that you kind of consider to be your transparent tools. You know, I've got my transparent kind of mastering EQ that I reach for when I don't want people to necessarily hear the EQ, but it's happening. Same with compression and limiting. There's these tools that you're going to find that are this does the job without it being obvious that the job was done. It's a very valuable thing. So you're going to want those. Those are the ones that you're using on something like a piano for sure.
Yes.
But the other thing is that you are mixing it top down rather than bottom up, which means that for something that is like a piano and a vocal duo, I am probably doing the bulk of my mixing on the mix bus rather than on the individual tracks. Because I find that just works. If I brighten up the vocal and the piano together, or better yet, compress them together, it seems to yield a way more natural result to me for whatever reason. And I think it's because we need to make these two separately recorded things sound like they're the same performance, like the singer did sing it while playing that piano part. So it's just about gluing them together with bus processing rather than individual processing.
Maybe we should do an episode on that at some point, how to actually glue things to. We haven't talked about like the busing thing, because I know that you're totally right, but I also know that it's pretty difficult, and then people will be like, what should I listen to if I treat them together at a bus? Like, how do I know when they are? Because I remembered when I first like learned that or experimented with that, it was always kind of hard for me to tell whether or not I'm actually gluing things together or if I'm causing more harm than good. And like when do I know when it's kind of glued, or did I now cause something, another problem by trying to do that? And so it's kind of, we have to think about that. But I agree that in a sparse arrangement with only a few elements, it is a good approach to do sort of a top-down thing and treat them as one performance in the room, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah, now that is all, like the top-down mixing things usually like sweetening, less problem solving. Like if there's like a dynamic, like honky mid-tone boxiness that you need to carve out of your piano, you're not going to want to chop like 6 dB out of your vocals too. So it's gonna always be jumping between the two, like ISO tracks versus the mix top-down thing. But just know that that's where it works best.
Yeah,
is if you can do it on the bus.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. Anything else to say about this?
Oh, I'm sure, but I think that's a pretty good start, and I really hope people enjoyed this because it's so different.
Yeah, I made so many notes while you were talking all the time. I've never done that on episode, but I've made so many notes now because there's a couple of things for other episodes that we maybe need to dive more into or whatever.
Cool.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah. And there's so much value to getting good at this style of recording because it forces you to use your ears in a different way than the scientific. Like if you check these boxes, you're going to get a good drum recording kind of thing. Like you can really make it happen with drums by like being systematic. But with something like a sparse piano recording, there's so much listening where you've just got 2 mics to make it happen with. Ultimately, 2 mics and a player.
Yeah,
and you have to figure it out with those ingredients, and that really builds a confidence in trusting your ears and learning to listen and what translates and intuition. So it's a great skill as a DIY music producer.
And the final thing, maybe before we wrap it up, does anything of what we just said in this episode change when the piano is part of a bigger arrangement, or when we add another thing, like let's say it's an acoustic guitar comes in or whatever? Is that stuff still relevant then, or is it completely different?
So let's go with the piano in a full mix, like a full band.
Right.
There's
Right.
Bass, drums, guitar, piano, vocal kind of thing. I think it does get easier because the importance on the room gets a lot less important because you don't hear the room, you hear just the impact. So it's still going to be the same in that you're miking it with probably 2 mics and making it sound like a great piano, but you're going to be listening to that in the context of the mix, hopefully, with a guitar and drums and bass at a minimum, and just hearing how that sits in there. So because the room's less important, you'll probably end up a little bit closer, I'll bet, because you don't need any room information necessarily. But maybe not. Pay attention to that. And then it becomes much more regimented timing-wise would be the other thing.
Yeah.
Because the compounded timing mistakes sound sloppy, so you're just going to really want them locked into your drummer, essentially.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think it's easier. I think
it's way easier. Also, all the whole like detailed conversation and everything we talked about, this just almost doesn't matter anymore then. And you can also process it way more because you will bring out the stuff that cuts through. You can eliminate other stuff entirely because it's going to get masked anyway. So you can be a lot of like very heavy-handed because it's not going to be obvious. If it played in solo, it often sounds terrible then, but that's not what you want to do. You want to
just like acoustic guitars we've mentioned, when they're in like a dense rock mix, it's all about the attack. You're just hearing the pick attack as a rhythm instrument. It's not like the bass is gone. You don't need that stuff. Where it's the same with the piano. You might want only that low end boom, but you also might just want the high stuff. You just mix it to fit the song at that point.
Yeah, I hope that makes sense, that we just told you basically that a solo piano is there's less you need to do in the mix, but it's at the same time it's harder.
Yeah, way harder.
So I hope that makes sense.
Situation.
Yeah, I hope that makes sense. I mean, it doesn't mean there's less work to do, because the work is in the choosing the right piano, playing it well, miking it well if you have a real one. So there is a lot of work to do, but there's less work in post and processing. And overall, if you have a great player, a great room, a great instrument, then it's not that much work, yet it is so hard compared to the other thing. I hope that really makes sense, and I hope you know what to do with that information, because that just means you just can't half-ass it. You have to really take it seriously, listen closely. Fresh ears, also a big thing. I think if you are not really paying close attention, or if your ears are tired, then it's very hard to pick up these tiny details. Yeah. So you got to be really present, listen for all the details. You got to know what you actually want it to sound like. Maybe there's some research necessary in like, what does an upright piano sound versus a grand piano, that sort of thing. So a lot of attention to detail, I'd say, because there's no way around capturing it very well. And if you just have it as part of a denser arrangement, then just think about the big picture of the song and where the piano can fit in, and then just carve it out like you would with any other instrument in there, and you can be way more heavy-handed than that.
The advice I would give, if you're developing these skills and you just don't feel confident, is do both. It's really easy to, prioritize your acoustic guitar or acoustic piano recording, if that's what you're doing. But then if you're not confident that it's good enough, or that you're going to be able to get it where you want it in the mix, whip off a MIDI version as well. And then you've got both versions. Everybody's got access to MIDI now, so it's an option.
It's an option, yeah, for sure.
Something I've done as well. I've and I just was recording in a band, and I didn't know how confident I could be with that piano player. I would just also get a MIDI version. Usually the MIDI version would already be done in pre-production. So that's awesome. The other thing, this is, okay. We're going to end it on this. We're not going to get too deep. I think we should do another episode on sparse arrangements in general, not just piano. But sometimes you are miking the piano without knowing what the end context is going to be. So it's a song that's written on piano by a singer-songwriter, but you're going to build a band around it. So you don't know how to treat that piano. So you mic it one way with a lot of room, and it ends up being a big rock dense mix, and you have to fix it. So you're going to have to re-record or whatever kind of thing. So that is a nightmare situation.
It is.
Not a nightmare, but I
know what you mean.
Yeah, it's really hard to make the right choice without knowing what it's going to be down the road. Okay, let's wrap it up. Because,
I have so many thoughts. Even then, I could add something, but I've made so many notes. There's going to be material for other episodes too.
Yeah. We got way more. We could talk for another couple hours, but I want to bridge it to stuff beyond just piano, I think. So it'll be good.
Yeah. Maybe if you're listening now and you enjoyed this, even though we were winging this episode, if you have other topics that you want us to cover that are like a little outside of what we usually do, there's a chance that we've still done it or have thoughts on it, and so let us know if you want to do that. And I think some of these episodes that are a little more challenging for us or a little different are actually good for the podcast. Like, I've never taken that many notes throughout an episode, and maybe that leads us to new things too that we can explore. So if you have any suggestions, anything you want us to do on the podcast, let us know. And if you feel like I wasn't that present today, if you're watching the video, usually I look more into the camera than today, but that was just because when Malcolm was talking, I was constantly making notes, and I'm going to make a bunch of episodes about that, I think, in the future. But yeah, let us know. And I hope that helped, Mark. So maybe also just shoot me a message and tell me if that answered your question. And I'd love to know your progress too, because that question has been submitted almost a year ago. Now we're faster doing that, but there's some still sitting that we just didn't get to. So a lot has happened probably since then. So Mark, let us know. Maybe you've discovered something that works really well for you now in the meantime, and we'd love to hear that. So if that's the case, go to the community, the selfrecordingband.com/community, post it in there or send us a message about it. We love to hear that stuff from you. So let's wrap it up then. As always, if you enjoyed this episode and you got value from it, share it with your friends. Go to your socials, post a screenshot there, tag us at Malcolm Owen Flood, at Benedictine, tag us on Instagram. If there's a guest episode with someone else, tag them too, of course. And we love to see these. We always share them. We always respond to them because it's so great to see the community grow. It's great for us to get the feedback that we get from you. So if you got any value out of this, please share it. And if you're a new listener, if you just discovered us, then thank you for sticking with us till the end here. And I hope you'll stay around for the next episodes too. And now there's one final thing that I want to bring up here, and that is we just got another amazing review on Apple Podcasts. And if that's another thing you can do. If you listen on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform of choice, and there's a way for you to leave a review, then we especially love that because not many people do it. Actually, we always tell them to, but not many people actually take the time to do it. And if you do, we love this. So the Self-Recording Band Fan is the name of this person. We would give you a shout out if there would be your real name, but in this case, it's the Self-Recording Band Fan, which I also love. Yeah. Says nice. Absolutely the best, 5 stars, of course, and 3 exclamation marks. If you are a DIY musician or producer who wants to learn more about recording and mixing, this is absolutely the best podcast you could possibly listen to. As a result of this podcast, I signed up for the coaching program, and it has been extremely helpful in advancing my knowledge of recording. So thank you for that review. If you feel the same way about it, we'd really appreciate if you could leave something like that. But even a screenshot on Instagram is totally awesome.
Yeah, so fantastic. And again, please just connect with us. It's like the most rewarding thing, meeting the people that listen to this and are getting value out of it and seeing the recordings and stuff like that, be it on Instagram or our Facebook community or whatever. It's a lot of the time me and Benny are just speaking into the void here.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, there's a lot of people listening and we're not necessarily getting to talk to them, but they're out there. So it's really cool when we actually do get to, put a name and a face behind it.
Yes, totally. It's crazy to think actually that there's so many people listening to us and it feels like we're just talking to the computer, right?
Yeah.
Dude, I was thinking about that this weekend when we played the show. I was nervous like hell because I'm not used to it anymore the way I did, and I was like nervous like crazy just because we were playing in front of like 100 people or so. Right. Now thinking about that, a few times that are listening to the episodes and It doesn't make me nervous at all. It's kind of crazy in a way.
Yeah. I think we just break 60,000 downloads on the Buzzsprout?
Yeah, I think we did.
I think we're right around there, but like it's like, wow, these episodes are like sometimes like an hour long. Like imagine 60,000 hours of us talking.
Yeah. Totally. So thank you. Thank you for listening to us. Everyone. Thank you for sticking around, and thank you for being a listener. And we hope to see you next week again.
Yeah, see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.